When Mike called me, I threw up.
When Mike called me, I crashed my car.
Seriously?
Yeah.
Man, I hear you. I mean, my heart was literally like pounding right out of my chest.
I thought it was only me.
It was like pure fear. It's fear. Why'd we all feel like that, Mike? You remember something we don't you, Mike? Something happens to you when you leave this town. Farther away, the hazier it all gets. But me, I never left. So yeah, I remember all of it.
Pennywise.
And that's a clip from It, Chapter 2. I'm delighted to say one of its stars, James McAvoy, is here in the studio. Hello, James.
Hello there, thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure. We've already shared cough sweets.
We have. And you've educated me that now do blackcurrant, lemon, and another flavour?
There's the old ordinary flavour.
There's the old Ming flavour,
Yeah.
which was very good for me when I was on stage a lot. But now I feel that the blackcurrant's going to bring me back from the pastels.
So, It Chapter 2. Do we need to have seen It Chapter 1?
I
I think we do.
I think you do too. I don't think you'd have the worst time at the theatre if you haven't, but I think it's better to have seen it first.
Okay. And it is being shown again so people can actually go and see it, so they're up to date before Chapter 2 starts. Get us up to speed a bit, but then just where are we with this story 27 years?
27 years later, and the children from the Losers Club have, barring one, all moved away. They're the Losers Club, but they've all moved away. And the magic of Pennywise that works its thing over Derry means that we've all forgotten. We've all forgotten what happened. And we've all become very much winners. We've all become big successes in our life. And yet we're all missing something, and we're all still really allowing ourselves to be the victims of the same trauma that we suffered as children and the same problems that we were suffering from as when we were children. We get a call from the one remaining member of the Losers Club who remained in Derry and therefore never forgot, telling us that it is back. We thought we killed it when we were 12. We haven't killed it. And we made a promise, we made an oath, a blood oath, to come back if it ever came back. So 27 years later, we all returned to Derry, and we have a sudden, from having suffering amnesia, to the point where I didn't even remember, my character didn't even remember that he had a brother, let alone that Pennywise killed my brother. It all comes back. And part of the trauma of the film, part of the journey of the film is these guys recalling everything that happened to them as children and filling in some blanks that you didn't have filled in even in the first movie.
Towards the end of that answer, for a number of people listening, they'd have heard a voice going, "Hiya, Georgie," as they remember the brother, as you remember the brother. So you are Bill Denbrough.
I play Bill Denbrough.
And who are you?
I am
very successful, but
a very successful writer, screenwriter, novelist. He is that classic avatar of Stephen King figure that he puts into a lot of his books. He shares a lot of Stephen's worldview, and he's suffered a lot of the same criticism that Stephen himself has suffered, i.e. that, yeah, you're a good page-turner, but you're a total hack and you don't know how to finish your stories. Bill very much believes in a good story is valid and is relevant simply because it's a good story. And Stephen, I think, is quite similar to that. He comes back to Derry and I think he fills in certain sort of traumatic holes in his heart that leave him hopefully in the future being able to finish a story.
Yeah, and that is a funny running joke that runs through. And of course, we've seen what you were like before because your young self is played by Jaden Martell.
Mm-hmm.
People are thinking, which one was he? He's the one with the stammer, basically. And the stammer is more or less gone?
It's gone at the beginning. So the amnesia, the glamour, the magic of Pennywise means they all forget. He even forgets that he ever had a stammer. He comes back and does this guy having to deal with the fact that not that he used to have a stammer and now it's back. He can't even remember ever having one, so it's completely frustrating. It's back. Everything comes back.
Most people have a Stephen King story. Mine was for The Stand, which I think was the first one that I read of his, big, fat, fantastic, very exciting, extraordinarily high rates of peril as you're going through the story. What was yours? Did you read this early, or was your first Stephen
This wasn't
King
my
book?
first. My first was The Dark Tower. And I love that whole series, which gets really trippy towards the end. And in fact, Pennywise, don't want to spoil anything, but Pennywise actually shows up in The Dark Tower at one point. as does the world of The Stand and Captain Trips and all that kind of stuff. That was my first introduction. Then I read It. So I went for two of the biggies. Then I went for The Stand, and then The Shining. And I think that was it. That's all I got through. And then when I heard I might be involved in this film, because I got sort of teased that I might be in this film by Jessica Chastain, and then never received a phone call for 2.5 months, I was like, I couldn't resist starting to read it again, which is tricky because, you know, you're baiting yourself almost. Because if I never get that call from Andy Muschietti, the director, I'm falling in love with the idea of playing Bill, and I'm never going to get that call. So there was a little point where I was cursing Jessica Chastain for a line.
So, and she was on the show recently with Sophie Turner for Dark Phoenix, and she's good company, but clearly I'm not going to believe a word that she ever says again.
No, she was good. She was true to her word. Basically, I went to go and see...
She got you the gig, did she? Or?
Kinda. She, I went to see It, the first one, with Nicholas Hoult when we were in Montreal filming X-Men. Next day, come in, she says, did you enjoy the film? And I said, yes, I did. And she went, oh, that's good. And I said, why are you saying it like that? And she says, well, because the director, Andy, is my friend and he wants you to play Bill. And I was like, fantastic, tell him I'll do it in a New York minute. And then again, never heard anything for a New York 2.5 months.
What was it like the first time you saw Pennywise, Bill Skarsgård in full gear?
I've got a bit of an issue with people in prosthetics and big costumes. And I've done a lot of it. Yeah, I know it. All the way back to Narnia. And my mate Nick, he's a very good friend of mine, but I find it hard to hold his eye when he's in all that stuff and chatting away and talking about like, oh, should we go and watch football or whatever. I can't look at him. And I had the exact same thing with Bill as Pennywise. It is a particularly crazy makeup. I've got to say though, I think a lot of people think, you know, because it is such an iconic baddie, and people are talking about his performance as being so special and I think iconic as well. And I think people think that it's the makeup, it's the story, it's the power of Stephen's writing. It is all those things, by the way, and thank you very much, Stephen King, for providing that. But what Bill Skarsgård does in that thing, you don't see it on the screen, but you feel it. But when we're there on the day, he is racking his body every time he says just a couple of lines. And the director would be like, okay, that was perfect, let's go one more time. And you'd be like, where is Bill? I'm ready to go. And he'd look over into the corner and Bill would be in pieces, heaving, just trying to get himself back together to go for another take. And that was just for small takes. It was, you don't see it because it's just about the kind of, the tension that he's putting into that character and the voice, and he's ripping his throat apart every time he speaks in that voice. It's pretty disconcerting to be around. It's brilliant.
I want to ask you about two scenes, one you're in and one you're not. The one that you're in, I don't think is in the book, but is one of the most effective, terrifying scenes in the movie, because I don't want to spoil it, but it's the bit with the mirrors in the Hall of Mirrors.
Yeah.
And was that your idea, that scene?
I was feeling like we were missing a key point in Bill Denbrough's arc, and it felt like Pennywise was coming after each and every one of them individually and going for their sort of emotional Achilles heel. And his emotional Achilles heel is the weight of responsibility he feels for the death of his brother and all that. And I was like, there's no point where he confronts me with this. He does scary things to me, but he never actually... That's the Achilles heel. Why is he not going for it? And he knows it, so why is he not going for it? So I said to Andy and Barbara one night, look, I've got this big, huge problem. I think we're missing a big thing. I don't want new scenes. Just maybe we can try and bend some of the scenes that I'm in around to deal with this. And they looked like they were scratching their heads, and then Andy just... It was sort of like Minority Report. Remember Minority Report when Tom Cruise was doing all this kind of stuff?
Arm waving.
Yeah, doing all that arm waving and then put CGI sense in afterwards. And it was kind of like that. He started to go, right, I'm going to take that scene here, I'm going to take this scene here, I'm going to shove them together, I'm going to take a bit here, I'm going to take a bit there. And in 10 minutes, over a glass of tequila, he created this whole thing that was going to cost Warner Brothers an extra $5 million and take us and then take us an extra week. And he put together this brilliant scene. I said, if you do that, I think I've just watched you create something brilliant, and I'm so delighted. I've been on so many films where I've talked to directors and writers and producers where I've had this kind of moment and then nothing happens. But he's, one, true to his word, cares about the story, but he's also just so in charge of his faculties as a technician and as an artist, and he cares about that story and knows that story so much that he was actually able to put it into action and do something with it. I was so impressed.
That's one scene. The other one, which you're not involved in, but I think we can talk about it because it's in the opening scene of the movie, and it's in the book. There's a very graphic, homophobic attack that happens. Mm-hmm. And I know the director and Jessica Chastain have been asked about this, but it is very, very difficult to watch, obviously, as it should be. Do you think it's justified?
I think that one of the things that Stephen King is fascinated about, or one of the things that make this not just a horror story, is the fact that it's a coming-of-age tale, it's a romance, it's a comedy, it's a horror movie, yes, and it is also an exploration, as he does in many, many, many of his books, an exploration of the dark heart of small-town America, or small-town Western society, but particularly the small-town America that he lives in. He basically lives in Derry. It's called Bangor, Maine, but Derry is based on Bangor, Maine. And he loves it. He absolutely loves it. But he also sees the dark side of it. And I don't think that he is a political mover or shaker. I don't think he's ever trying to change the world or release a message, unless it's a more spiritual one. But I do think he reacts to what he sees in the world and he puts it in. We're writing about horror. We're writing about the murder of children. It might be by a trans-dimensional, shape-shifting clown, but we're writing about the abuse and the murder of children, and it's entertainment. And it's scares and it's entertainment. And I think to start that film off saying bad stuff really, really does happen, and it is horrific, is a great leveler. You could look at horror movies that attack children and be like, this is just exploitative. This is just titillating, exploitative schlock, which is the type of criticism that gets thrown at Stephen King sometimes. But he chose to start his book with a true crime that happens in the real world every single day. And if we don't shrink from the gore of ripping a child's face off, we shouldn't be shrinking from the gore of a homophobic hate crime. I think it's warranted. I think it's fair enough.
Just one more thing before you go, James, and that is I and lots of other people are very excited about his Dark Materials.
I am, yeah, definitely. Well, I'm in it.
Where you play Lord Asriel.
Check.
And I know you did this a while back, but it must be just waiting for this to turn up on television. Must be quite a thing, because if you ask me my favourite trilogy, I'd probably go for these books. You know? Yeah,
no, I think it might be mine. It was Lord of the Rings. I remember I did a play when I was about 21, and I was talking about Lord of the Rings, and I was talking about I was also talking about Harry Potter, and just saying they're great books and all that. And the people in the cast hadn't read either of those things. It was actually Indra Varma, who you might know from many things, but she was in Game of Thrones, and she strangely was telling me about Game of Thrones at the time. This is back years ago, 2002 or something. And she says, what you really need to read, James, the way I feel about the Lord of the Rings, the way you feel about that, I feel that way about his Dark Materials. So I started reading it, and it blew me away, and I've read it 3 times. I've listened to every audio production that the BBC have put out, and I've listened to Philip Pullman read it to me twice, which is, if nobody's done, the BBC dramatisation is brilliant, but the Philip Pullman narration, it's not like listening to an actor, it's like listening to your uncle or your granddad tell you a really good story brilliantly well without necessarily acting it. You know, it's brilliant. And so I've been through it all a million times. My friend Callan Crawford was casting it, and I think 2 or 3 actors let them down in succession at the last minute, and they needed somebody with a certain kind of profile in America to qualify, I think, for HBO funding. And so she called me out and she went, we've talked about this, but would you fancy playing Lord Asriel? And I says, oh yeah, man, when will I start? And I'm not like, I've never seen myself as classic casting for it, but I'm like, I know what moves I'll pull. And she goes, Monday. And I'm like, it's Friday. She's like, yeah, I know, do you still want to do it? And I was like, I happened to be free. I was like, I'm in. So I showed up and sort of knew exactly what I would do, really, because I've just spent so many time with the characters, and then gave the producers and the writers and the directors headaches probably for the rest of the time, because I'm like, I know too much about it.
It's going to be event television, I think, is how they refer to it.
I hope so. Unless we've done a really bad job, it will be. I think they're just stunning stories. They're daring and bold and challenging, and potentially controversial, but that's all good.
James McAvoy, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.